Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for attending this session and your interest in the various different options of treatment for interstitial cystitis. And in this particular session, we're going to be talking about those kinds of things that can be used from a physical point of view in order to deal with IC. So we're going to talk about, first of all, what is different about this approach than what you're experiencing in the day-to-day community of what I would call the matter science of healing. And we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. We'll also talk about the modality and the difference between multimodality and unimodality therapies. Also talk about interstitial cystitis and how it is viewed from an energy science perspective. And then we'll talk about how yoga and breathing techniques of yoga can be used as treatment for IC, and actually how yoga can be used as a prescription for treating the qualities that are out of balance in IC. And then we'll shed some light on how this is not an unusual concept, and that actually this has been done in the past and recently in the last 10 years, and clearly the energy science is in parallel with this kind of approach. And then lastly, well, what to do next. So currently, when you go to the physician, the allopathic doctor in his office today, you're actually visiting a doctor who is skilled and has great art in dealing with a disease from a molecular standpoint. That is to say, he understands the molecules of disease, and he knows how to balance those molecules of disease with molecules of healing. So pharmacology or pharmaceuticals becomes his his or her bailiwick in terms of the understanding of how the treatment of disease can be managed, and thus help the patients who come to seek his care. So the problem is that oftentimes, particularly in chronic diseases such as interstitial cystitis, fibromyalgia, even common problems such as irritable bowel syndrome, the issue is that there is no molecule that is identified as a problem that can be dealt with by balancing it with a pharmaceutical. And hence, in this kind of setting, the physician is really in a situation where he can only help support but not heal the disease, and hence you find many patients with IC who are told this condition is treatable but not curable. Well, the biologic energy science model is really a different way of healing disease. It is not new. It goes back thousands of years. The traditional Oriental medicine approach, from which we get acupuncture, the Ayurvedic discipline, from which this information is cultivated, is a science which deals with different diseases, but not from a molecular standpoint. It deals with it from an energy perspective. And, you know, we don't really have a way of seeing the body as an energy field. Not in our current program of viewing disease. But these energy disciplines that I just mentioned actually view from a very contemporary way how the body is put together. And it comes from, interestingly, Einstein's equation that says E equal mc squared, that matter and energy are completely interchangeable at a constant, that what is energy is matter, and what is matter is energy, that they are simultaneously coexisting. So it is just as relevant for us to talk about the molecules of the body and study them, but to also look at the body as an energy field and study the diseases from that standpoint as well. It's just that right now, what is predominant and prevailing and what the consumer of health care understands is that they go to the doctor and they don't know it, but they go to the doctor to have a matter science approach to their healing. The value of the energy science type of approach is that it gives us a way to deal with chronic disease and actually heal chronic disease. It takes a lot of work on the part of the individual to do this, but there is no question in my mind that given an individual's diligence and fortitude and interest in this approach, that one can heal IC. Having said that, it requires that one have an understanding of the energy body and how the energy body works. Because the vernacular, the vocabulary of the energy science model is totally different than that of the molecular model. And so one has to understand, at least the practitioner who's guiding the client or patient needs to understand the vernacular of the energy science model. He has to understand the body as an energy field. He has to have the vocabulary to talk about diseases in the energy field. Once he's adept at doing that, he can guide the person who has disease, chronic diseases, through a series of steps in order to help bring about healing. So doing medical science from an energy science perspective versus a matter science perspective requires that we have some kind of understanding of the differences between the two. The matter science measures molecules, a quantitative way of doing the management of disease, whereas the energy science looks at disease in a qualitative way. It says that all diseases have certain qualities that go out of balance, and this imbalance creates the disease process, and the way of healing is to bring those qualities back into balance. So if there's a lot of dry quality in the body, then one would want to use the oily quality to bring about balance and hence reduce the dryness in the body and bring about healing. It's a simple technique. And you'll learn more about that as we go along. It's a very simple concept. The second thing is that the matter science views disease as molecular, that molecules are responsible for the disease, whereas the energy science says that there is an imbalance of the gastrointestinal tract qualities that then hence lead to disease, and hence all disease begins in the GI tract, and that's why the nutritional formats are so important in terms of structuring healing, both from a molecular and from a energy science perspective. And so the last difference is that the matter science wants to fix the molecules, and as we alluded to earlier, the energy science wants to fix the imbalance. These are basic distinctions between the two types of healing, but they're very, very important because, as you can see, they go about their healing in an entirely different way. And so you know that when you go to somebody who's doing energy science work that is using an Ayurvedic approach or traditional medicine approach, then you're going to know that you're stepping into a different realm of healing. And I think that that's very important right now for the consumer to understand. So when we heal IC, we're actually healing by changing the qualities. The qualities that are involved, that are out of balance in IC, are the hot and mobile qualities. So the qualities emphasized in the treatment of IC would be cooling and static. That is, static meaning to reduce the mobility. And how this translates into yoga practice is first and foremost, is to avoid the hot and mobile qualities. So the expressions of hot and mobile, I think you can kind of understand. You know, if you saw somebody who had flushing, or they looked, their face was quite red, they had various skin lesions on their body. When they passed urine, it was hot or warm. They had burning on urination. These would all be expressions of the hot quality. And the mobile quality is one who is observing people who move very fast. They are determined to do multitasking, but their mind becomes very mobile, which means they have a run-on of thoughts, feelings, and emotions. You can see how both of these can be expressed in terms of our emotions, or in terms of how we become imbalanced with respect to mental activities. So people become impatient, they become easily frustrated, sometimes because of the hot quality. Often enough is not enough, so they have to push real hard in order to make things happen for themselves, because that's the only way they know how to do things. There oftentimes is skepticism, judgment, criticism. And this is not to say that these are things that are wrong. It's merely the fact that these are just expressions, mental expressions of the imbalance that we see from a mental perspective, and that they go away as healing occurs. Another very important aspect about energy science healing when it comes to IC and the imbalance is that it's not just one form of treatment that you do, but a multiplicity of things that brings about healing, because IC, like all chronic disease, is caused by a group of energetic imbalances. It's caused by things that we do in multiple different ways in order to create the imbalances of hot and mobile. So, because of that, one would expect that it's a multiplicity of different things that you do in order to bring about balance in this multimodality approach. In the molecular approach, there's usually just one modality that's engaged, and it's usually pharmaceutical. It may be surgical, but there are very few surgical options open to the IC patient, and these are really in question as to really whether they can be beneficial in the long run. I'm not talking about the short term, but in the long run, they have to be repeated. These surgical interventions have to be repeated or renewed or in some way affected over a long period of time. They are not long-standing solutions. But in the energy science approach, it's multimodality, multiple different things, such as a change in lifestyle behavior patterns, such as eating and sleeping, such as nutrition. As you're aware, you need to avoid foods that can give you the hot and mobile qualities. Now, this is not obvious, but fortunately there are nutritional formats such as at icdiet.com and at foodsheal.com. These nutritional formats can give us information as to how to avoid the hot and mobile qualities, because that's built into the information that is provided for you with respect to food choices. Herbs can reverse abnormal chronic energy vectors in the body, and these can not only serve to heal by doing so, but they can also be rejuvenative. They can help rebuild the body because of its chronic disease. And lastly, and the focus of our attention today, is that yoga can be used to cool and slow the body's energy patterns down. And this can stabilize the body's energy and can be a very effective adjunct to other modalities that we've just talked about. Now, there have been some very interesting works. The one that is probably the most important, and the one that we're going to focus on, is a book that came out in 2002. Mahawald and Ripley wrote a book about their experience using yoga and acupressure in an 8-week exercise program with special reference to interstitial cystitis and urethral syndrome. Right now, urethral syndrome is actually just interstitial cystitis. There's no difference between the two entities. These disease labels are one and the same. Another work done in 2011 is a DVD on Your Pace Yoga, Relieving Pelvic Pain, and then my work that was just recently published. I like to focus on Mahawald and Ripley's study or work. This work actually could have been perhaps with some intent been published, but I can tell you that right now it's the matter science literature of today is not very receptive to this kind of publishing, and I can tell you that in 2002 it would clearly not have been a possibility. So this comes from personal experience, and I think that actually what Mahawald and Ripley wanted to do was essentially get something out there for the consumer to look at and make their own assessment, rather than trying to convince the matter science molecular world of medicine. Mahawald actually was involved in Hatha Yoga in the 1990s, and she developed symptoms of IC, and she noticed that as she continued her practice and modified it, that her IC improved. And so she talked with Ripley, who was actually a urologist, and they teamed together to offer yoga as a treatment option. And in 2002, they were interviewed, and this is a link to that interview. It's an extensive interview, and it's done by Jill Osborne of the Interstitial Cystitis Network, and it's quite good because it gives you some information about the use of yoga and how it can be used as an adjunct in therapy in IC. What Mahawald found in their use of yoga that over 90% of participants felt that yoga helped with some or even all of their symptoms. It helped most when the practice, this is very important, when the practice was consistent. And the points that were made is that yoga does not cure IC. As we talked about, it is a piece in a multimodality approach, but it is not meant as a standalone therapy, and I think that's very important. And as I think many people have noticed in the IC community, that actually IC is helped with a nutritional approach and a herbal approach, but it may not necessarily cure the problem. It's only when you start adding nutrition and herbs together that you could make some significant strides, as I point out in the IC research that's placed on the icdiet.com website. They also showed that most of the scores were somewhat to very much, implying that many people were very significantly affected and improved with their treatments. So one of the questions that was commonly asked by participants is, how long before I see results? And the answer was that it depends. Depends on, actually, in my experience, that it's dependent upon how long the symptoms of IC have been around. If you have had symptoms of IC for 6 months, probably you're going to see pretty fast results. But if you've had IC chronically and suffered with prolonged issues and have associated other disease labels such as IBS, GERD, fibromyalgia, these particular problems suggest a much deeper process and will require a much longer period of time. The other thing that they noticed, and we have noticed this as well, is that there are hills and valleys of a pattern of improvement that occurs over several weeks of their 8-week program. And this is shown here. This is a diagrammatic representation of the life of someone with IC who recovers. First of all, you notice that they were in balance. All their qualities were moving along pretty well until they start having the recurrent non-bacterial urinary tract infections. And this is actually just increasing hot and mobile qualities. And you can see these hills and valleys as actually a sine wave or a wave-like pattern. This is because diseases, in all states of diseases, no matter what the disease is, from an energy science perspective, it always expresses as hills and valleys, as good days, bad days, good weeks, bad months, good months. And these hills and valleys, as sine waves, is actually literally an expression of the energy field itself. That's why we see this kind of wave-like activity, because energy expresses itself in waves, and since disease is actually merely a representation of the energy waves of the body, hence you see disease represented as waves as well. It comes to the point, however, where the flares of IC become so great and so intense that there is no period of time of significant relenting of symptoms, and that these flares occur every month, every 2 months, and they continue until something is done by the person, by the individual who's suffering from these symptoms. And whether it's nutrition and lifestyle choices, herbs, or yoga, all of these modalities then come into play to start bring about healing. And then on the right side, you start seeing this graph move from a high level of imbalance to a point where balance is achieved. This does not mean that the symptoms go away right after you've cleared a couple of flares. It means that it requires persistence and consistency, as was noted in the Mahalwald study, that these kinds of interventions require time to affect the energy body. A little bit of note about acupressure versus Marma points. The acupuncture or meridian system that comes from the traditional Oriental medicine approach offers particular points, such as stomach points, spleen points, that can be energized, usually through moxibustion or heat applied through a needle. But acupressure, and this is their finding, is that acupressure points that are used and stimulated in yoga postures can produce changes in the energy field. And in the Ayurvedic tradition, the energy science approach talks about Marma points. These Marma points are nothing but acupressure points. There are no meridians involved in Marma therapy, but clearly acupressure points are Marma points. And as you can see on the right side of the slide, there are about 6 Marma points on the lower abdomen below the belly button that can be used in Marma to remove certain abnormal areas of energy focus. There's one in the elbow. There are a couple at the ankle that are actually literally bladder points. And these Marma points are routinely activated, and most specific they're asana practices that target interstitial cystitis. Now here's the same diagram, but you can notice with the individual on the left, he's doing an extended, because of his low back flexibility and anterior flexibility of the chest and lower abdomen, he's able to do an extended Bhujangasana or cobra pose. But you'll notice that these Marma points that you're seeing above these pictures are actually being activated. They're being activated because the person is stretching that part of the body. But you'll notice that the lady on the right who's doing a variation of Bhujangasana called Sphinx pose, is actually achieving the same kind of stretching. My point here is that you don't have to go through exaggerated asana practice in order to get the benefits of Marma. And so asana practice becomes a way to be able to activate these energy points on the body and bring about localized energetic healing to the body. So we're talking now actually about using yoga as a prescription for the energy body. And there are 2 distinct ways that you can use or activate the energy body and use these techniques to be able to bring about healing or more balance to the physiology. The first thing is breathing techniques. And breathing techniques, or what's called pranayama in the yoga world, is actually just a way of using the breath to activate certain healing processes in the body and clear toxic load from the body. And these breathing techniques are sometimes fundamental before you move on to asana practice. That is to say, sometimes people aren't strong enough to be able to undertake asana practice, and that breathing techniques or pranayama becomes the foundational piece before you move on to using physical postures. And this is a very important concept to get across, because some people who have had IC for a period of time are really not capable of taking on pranayama as a major asana practice or physical posture practice because of their debility. So breathing techniques is a really great entry point for these people. Physical postures then can be used to augment continued ongoing breathing techniques. And these physical postures improve digestion, and they improve imbalance. And these physical postures are meant to bring about healing and be adjunctive to the therapies that you're also adding, such as behaviors, such as nutrition, such as herbal therapy. So one of the things that is that you read sometimes in threads from IC patients in the various communities, such as the Interstitial Cystitis Network, is that their symptoms got worse with yoga. And I think this is a very, very important observation, because clearly there is no question that you can make yourself worse by doing certain asana practices when your body is not ready. So with the basic information that the hot and mobile qualities are the issues at hand, we would want to, with an IC yoga practice, we would want to avoid the hot and mobile qualities. Well, how could that happen? Well, the obvious one is hot yoga or Bikram yoga. These kinds of sessions can be very, very aggravating to a person with IC and really induce flares, no question about it. So you should clearly stay away from hot yoga. Yoga that emphasizes a lot of movement would exaggerate or emphasize the mobile qualities. And again, the yoga should be done slowly and not emphasizing a lot of movement. Doing too much too fast in a practice can aggravate both the hot and the mobile qualities. And so we have this term called krama. Krama is just merely meaning a variation. So what you saw on the previous slide with Bhujangasana, the man on the left was doing a full expression of Bhujangasana, and the woman on the right was doing a first variation, this first step in Bhujangasana in its expression. So you can see that these variations, or what are called kramas, are very important in terms of bringing a person along, because obviously most people walking the streets are not going to be able to do what that man did on the mat, but they certainly can do variations of Bhujangasana at various levels, even in a chair. So these kinds of movements that we're talking about, these kinds of postures, can be aligned in many different ways in order to create a movement along a continuum to the point where you start getting to fuller and fuller expressions of the posture. Certain postures can be aggravating. Forward bends are very heating to the body, but they can be cooling to the mind. What we're interested in is what they do to the body, not necessarily as much what they do to the mind. And so when one is doing actively a lot of forward bendings in different ways in a yoga practice, this can be very heating to the body and lead to acceleration or exacerbations of their flare. Standing poses can also be very heating, so one wants to be careful about that as well. There are some common myths about yoga, a yoga practice. I'm not flexible enough to do yoga, so I can't benefit from it. And as I hope I've pointed out to you so far, there's not really a need to have flexibility. The reason you're doing yoga is to develop flexibility. And so you don't have to have an entry point to do yoga. The second statement is just as common. It's I'm not, and then you fill in the blank. I'm not strong enough. I'm not flexible enough. I don't have enough time. Etc., etc. You get the point. So it's important for us to not let the mind dictate what we're going to do. You know, the mind has fear about change. It has fear about changing into new things. It wants to keep the status quo, even if the status quo is maintaining our flares. And lastly, I'll never be able to accomplish what I see in magazines. Well, I hope I've uh, demystified or reduced or changed that myth for you, because it's not what you see in the magazines that is what you can accomplish with yoga. You can get all you need by just simply being in the pose, wherever that is. Any pose that you can do done correctly can be healing. So about starting home practice, one of the things that you heard earlier is that what Mahalo said, and this is really pretty consistent in the yoga community, is that you aren't going to get anything by doing a yoga practice once every week or every 2 weeks. And that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you say, I want to get in shape, and then you go to the gym once a month, you know that you're probably not very serious about the practice. And the same thing happens for anything that we do to the physical body. If we're really serious, we're going to be doing things consistently. But the important thing, like the qualities of hot and mobile, we want to start slow and build. So say begin with 20 minutes of breathing technique. Add on to that some basic asana practice, and then as you go along, you can improve your endurance, strength, and stamina. Work to a light sweat, a little bit of sweat on the upper lip or something along the spine in the back, or maybe in the axilla or armpit. But the idea is to work to some degree of sweating, a mild amount of sweat, not heavy, not heavy. And then make it challenging, but not to fatigue. So say you've done say a 40-minute segment, and the next day you feel tired and you need to take a nap. What that says is that you overtaxed the body, so you need to cut back or maybe take another day off. And this is a controversial issue, but we here at the Our Yoga program feel that really no practice should be done, even breathing techniques during menses. Many yoga practitioners who are instructors, you'll find a mixed bag there, but we feel that it's probably not a good idea to do practice during menses. So the Our Yoga posture prescription is breathing exercises, also known as pranayama, sometimes foundational, as we talked about, to move on. A cooling flow sequence, not sun salutation, but moon salutation, would be important in terms of improving to improving the coolness of the body, that is, reducing the heat. Cooling asanas should be done, and should be done slowly, as we talked about earlier, and there should always be some Agni posture. This helps with digestion, and there are very specific postures that don't heat the body but improve Agni. And there are modifications that can be made based on the energy makeup and the clinical specifics. That is, do you have additional problems with vulvodynia, IBS, fibromyalgia, or GERD? So what should you do? What's the action step? Well, first of all, educate yourself about yoga. Find a supportive yoga teacher that is knowledgeable, that can help you with a program, and then maybe even look at yoga consults online that are available that can create a multidimensional program for you. Finding a yoga teacher, you can either start big by getting a whole package, or you can start small with just small amounts of asana and pranayama. You can get support online to help get started. And I think this is really important, is to journal results, looking for the subtle changes that are occurring to you as you move along with all of these various modalities. So that's it. Is there anything that's confusing that I've said thus far, or if you need clarification of what's been said, I'll just open it up to questions. Okay, here's one about the issue about Agni. They didn't quite understand how, if you're trying to heat up the digestion, how is it that the heating of the digestion doesn't heat the body up? Let me got a slide here. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. There are various different postures that can improve digestive strength, but they don't overheat the body. And this is similar to thinking of a very hot pot on the stove that doesn't have anything in it. But then if you put cold soup in it, the soup is not yet hot, but the pan or the pot is hot. And so if you think about the pot as being, that's on the stove as being your body, and the digestive strength or digestive fire as being what's in the pot, then the content is cold. That is, the digestive fire is cold, but the body itself is hot. So what these postures do is they don't overheat the body, that is, the container on the stove. They don't increase the heat of that, but they do increase the heat of the material or the content that's within the container. And this is a very important concept to understand, because that's how these various postures, such as Uttanappadasana, which is shown here on the slide, that's how these postures work. And just for interest, this particular posture is activating the lower abdomen. And so the lower abdomen is being activated and the legs are being raised. But the important thing is that it's this part of the body that not only is engaging the torso, not only engaging the core, but it's also engaging this area of the body that is responsible for digestion. And this is an energy science concept that isn't probably not well understood by the general public, but digestive strength is everything in terms of improving your health, improving or decreasing toxic load, and improving your recovery from IC, because 100% of people with IC have toxic load. So one of the first steps in improving toxic load is to improve digestive strength. That's why CCFT can be so powerful in terms of its treatment of IC, because it cools the body, that is, doesn't heat up the container on the stove, but it also clears toxic load by increasing digestive strength. So let's see, any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. So I think that we'll end this for now. If you have questions or want more information, you can always contact me at drbilldean.com or or drbilldean@gmail.com, or you can reach me through the icsolutions.tv blog site. Here are the topics that we covered. We talked about models of healing, multi versus unimodality, talked about the hot and mobile qualities of IC. We talked about some of the early work that's been done in 2002 with Mahalwal and Ripoli, and how it shows that yoga can be used as a prescription, that 90% of people could be helped by using yoga as with acupressure points. And what we're talking about here today is how to just refine that process even more. And then we talked about steps that you should take if you want to start a yoga practice at home. I think it's very important to use yoga at home. You can't go to a yoga studio all the time. There are going to be situations where you'll want to do it on the road, so to speak, or you'll want to stay at home because of various things that are happening in your family or whatever. So all of these things require that actually having a practice at home makes the most sense. So, okay, well, very good. Thanks very much for attending. I appreciate your questions and interest, and take care for now. Bye-bye.